The glass atrium of Westbridge Holdings gleamed beneath the mid-morning sun, the city skyline reflecting off its mirrored panels like a blade drawn in slow motion. Inside, on the 27th floor, the hum of air conditioning mixed with the quiet keystrokes of a man who was no longer supposed to matter. My name is Theo Marcellus, age 39, systems analyst, support tech, and, until about 3 hours ago, the most invisible man in the building. For the past 4 years, I'd sat in the basement-level operations wing, patching networks, troubleshooting software updates, and quietly flagging anomalies no one wanted to hear about. Anomalies that, if left unchecked, would take this entire empire down in flames. I had warned them. Again. And again. And now, they were sending someone to shut me up. I didn't look up when the soft knock came at my cubicle partition. I already knew who it was. "Mr. Marcellus," said a clipped voice behind me. "Ms. Granger would like to see you upstairs." It was Audrey from HR. She stood like someone delivering bad news from a safe distance, clipboard in hand, trying not to meet my eyes. I saved my work, locked my console, and rose. "Let's get this over with." We walked in silence to the express elevator. As the floors climbed, so did the tension. The rest of the IT team knew. I saw it in the sideways glances that never lingered. Especially in Armand's. He sat across from me in security protocols. We weren't close, but he nodded once as I passed, one of those subtle acknowledgements that meant more than words. Up on the 52nd floor, everything felt colder. Brushed steel. Glass walls. Minimalist furniture. A quiet that wasn't peaceful, but surgical. Cassandra Granger's office was designed to impress. Oversized monitors displayed meaningless stock visuals, network graphs, uptime statistics, a world map pulsing with fake assurance. She didn't rise as I entered. Neither did the man standing beside her, arms folded, wearing a smirk like it was custom tailored. Dane Holloway. Their new chief of cyber resilience, fresh from a headline-grabbing stint at some coastal fintech darling. "Have a seat, Theo," Granger said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I stayed standing. "This about the breach model I submitted yesterday?" I asked. Holloway chuckled. "No, this is about your continued insubordination. Your model was dismissed by our internal team. Unsupported. Overblown." I pulled out a printed log from my back pocket and laid it on the desk. "Unauthorized access pinged from an overseas mirror server. The signature matches 2 test environments we retired 3 months ago. Your firewall model didn't isolate the endpoint." Granger blinked but didn't touch the page. "Theo, you've been disruptive. For months now, you've sent escalating messages about imagined vulnerabilities. You've bypassed chain of command, contacted our audit partners, even tried to leak internal architecture notes to outside consultants." "I contacted them because you wouldn't listen," I replied. Holloway leaned in slightly. "You were brought on as a systems analyst. Not an architect. Not an engineer. You were meant to support the network, not dismantle it with paranoia." "This isn't paranoia," I said. "It's a pattern. Someone's probing your infrastructure, and you don't have the layers in place to detect what comes next." Granger slid a thick folder toward me. "Your severance package," she said calmly. "It includes a non-disclosure agreement and a generous payout, provided you refrain from further contact with any of our clients, partners, or affiliated agencies." There it was. The golden muzzle. "And the reports?" I asked. Holloway shrugged. "They'll be archived. Most won't make it past the logs." I stared at them for a long moment. Then reached down, took the pen, and signed. Let them think it was over. As I rose, Granger offered a final jab. "You understand, Theo, this isn't personal. You're just not aligned with where the company is going." I met her eyes. "No," I said. "I'm aligned with where it's headed. Straight into a wall." Outside the office, a private security guard stood waiting. Standard protocol. I gave him a nod, walked past without hesitation. What they didn't know was that every key report, every flagged timestamp, and every documented access error had already been mirrored to a secure drive in a location they'd never find. And I wasn't alone. Down in the lobby, Armand waited in his car, parked illegally and unbothered. As I climbed into the passenger seat, he handed me a small envelope. No one said anything, he muttered. But they signed it. The whole team. Inside were a dozen signatures, scribbled across a blank flashcard. A quiet statement. "We're in," I said. Armin nodded. "Logs are safe. Your timestamp analysis was right. There's more than one breach. Someone's waiting. Watching. They'll move when the financial suite launches next month," I said. He swallowed. "You think it'll collapse that fast?" "No," I said. "I think it'll collapse faster." We drove in silence through the city. Above us, Westbridge Holdings shimmered like a fortress. But I knew better. Fortresses don't fall because of outside armies. They fall because of the cracks no one wanted to admit were there. And I had the proof. The question wasn't whether they'd believe me. The question was whether they'd survive ignoring me. The sky over Rivergate darkened early that week, as if it sensed the undercurrent of what was coming. Inside my apartment, the only light came from 3 monitors glowing with logs, packet captures, and a clock counting down to the launch of Westbridge's new financial ecosystem, NovaSuite. 27 days. That's all the time left before the largest digital financial platform in the country went live, with an unpatched vulnerability hiding deep in its core. A vulnerability that wasn't just a design flaw. It was an open door. And now, I wasn't just watching from the sidelines. I was quietly laying the groundwork to expose everything. I leaned back in my chair, cracked my neck, and opened my encrypted messaging portal. To maya.stern@visa.gov Maya. The artifact I flagged in last week's report wasn't isolated. 2 additional pings matched it in the past 48 hours. That pattern I mentioned? It's spreading. It's no longer a theoretical risk. It's a live exploit vector. Theo. Maya Stern wasn't just a contact at Visa. She was the one person who hadn't laughed when I first reached out months ago, disguised under a pseudonym with nothing but logs and a theory. She'd listened. Quietly, cautiously. And now, she was listening again. Moments later, a reply pinged back. Maya Stern acknowledged. Routing this to CyberCon 5. Don't send anything else unsecured. They're watching. I knew who they were. Westbridge's elite security team wasn't built to protect, it was built to monitor. Once I'd started flagging system anomalies outside their playbook, I'd tripped more than a few alarms. My departure had been orchestrated to look like a clean termination, but behind closed doors, I had no doubt Holloway had started damage control. Damage control always starts with containment. But I'd already slipped out through a side door they didn't know existed. Armin sent over a fresh batch of internal logs from a remote node. He didn't include a message, just a file name. ghost_frame_w2_vuln.alt. I decrypted the contents slowly, line by line. It was worse than we thought. The same external signature that had accessed the Ghost protocol logs 2 months earlier had returned, this time triggering dormant code embedded in NovaSuite's legacy comms module. Someone, something, had embedded a Ghost routine that would only activate under specific server load and latency conditions. Code that wasn't Westbridge's. Which meant someone else had their hands inside the machine. That night, I reviewed every report I'd sent so far to federal agencies. Visa. The Department of Financial Systems. And Maya's direct contacts at CyberCon 5, a joint task force between the NSA and the Department of Defense's cyber unit. The new report included something different, a live attack simulation. I recorded a stress test on a clone NovaSuite instance, one I'd isolated weeks ago before my termination. Using only existing access pathways and minimal permissions, I was able to slip past the primary firewall, disable 2 layers of encryption masking, and extract Ghost data logs in under 3 minutes. No alert was triggered. No barrier pushed back. It was like the system welcomed me in. I attached the video and added a summary. If I can do this in a sandbox, it's only a matter of time before someone does it in production. You're not facing a system with poor defenses. You're facing a system designed, intentionally or not, to be vulnerable. I uploaded it to the secure drop server Maya had provided. She didn't reply that night, but I knew the wheels were turning. They had to be. 3 days later, I got a call. Not a message. Not an email. A call. My burner phone buzzed just as I was reviewing server trace logs. I answered without speaking. "Mr. Marcellus," came a voice, calm, clear, clipped. "This is Director Vance, CyberCon 5. We've reviewed your files." I waited. "We'd like to meet." The meeting took place in a secure government building deep inside DC, its walls lined with brushed steel and no windows. They checked my ID, my laptop, my bag, twice. Then led me to a room that looked like a war command center out of a movie: glowing tables, projection displays, a ring of agents and analysts. At the far end sat Maya Stern. She nodded at me once, then gestured for me to begin. I didn't bother with introductions. Just plugged in my drive and brought up the attack simulation. "This is what happens when Nova Suite hits peak transaction volume under concurrent connections across 3 data centers," I said. "The system doesn't just slow. It reroutes. And during that reroute, a secondary routine, one not in the original architecture, activates a temporary bypass of transaction audits." One of the analysts frowned. "That sounds like a developer tool." "It could be," I replied. "Except no one on the development team ever documented it. I ran background checks on every build author. The code line doesn't trace to any verified contributor. It appeared 6 weeks after a third-party audit firm submitted early-stage tests." "Are you saying the audit firm injected this?" asked Director Vance. "No," I said. "I'm saying someone used their credentials as cover. And that someone is still watching the system, right now." Silence. Maya stepped in. "We're already seeing early-stage pingbacks to offshore nodes. If this goes live in 3 weeks, we're looking at an exploit chain with national economic consequences." I looked up. "It won't take weeks." Back in my apartment that night, I sat in the dark with only the glow of my monitors for company. My report had been heard. Finally. But this wasn't over. Because as I stared at the live traffic scans Maya had given me access to, I saw something terrifying. A new pattern. The system wasn't just responding to intrusions. It was adapting. And that meant someone on the outside didn't just know Nova Suite was flawed. They were already using it. I sent a final message to Maya. "Confirmed, pattern is evolving. Not static injection. Learning behavior suggests early-stage AI-assisted breach tools. If they've trained a model on Nova Suite's infrastructure. This isn't just a vulnerability. It's a ticking time bomb." The countdown on my screen read 21 days. The question wasn't whether we could stop it. The question was, could we do it in time? The first public sign that something was wrong didn't come through a government alert or a breaking news story. It came through a tweet. Just 4 words. "Westbridge app is down?" Then a few more. "Anyone else missing transactions? I think my payroll vanished? Why is my account balance 0? I sat in a secure monitoring suite deep inside CyberCon 5's DC bunker, watching it unfold in real time. What started as scattered digital confusion was quickly becoming panic. Transaction delays. Account mismatches. Log inconsistencies across 3 major banks. Nova Suite wasn't even officially live. It was still in pilot mode. I turned to Maya Stern, who was standing beside Director Vance, eyes locked on the cascading screen of alerts coming in from our financial sector partners. "This is it," I said. "The ghost routine's active." Maya nodded slowly. "You called it. It is not a dormant exploit. It's a trigger, waiting for a specific configuration." The system didn't break. It pivoted. Director Vance was already barking orders. Shut down external data sinks. Move traffic analysis to isolated nodes. I want real-time packet deconstruction from every bank tied to the Nova Suite test environment. I stepped forward, pulling up my traffic model. "It's not just banks," I said. "Nova Suite's API tree reaches into third-party processors, payroll, invoice automation, insurance. They've all been exposed. And this isn't a solo operation." "What are you saying?" Maya asked. "I'm saying someone built this flaw. Trained it. Hid it. And now, they're pushing it live, on purpose." Silence. Then Director Vance gave the order. "Full red level breach status. Inform the Federal Reserve. This just became a national economic threat." Within the hour, conference calls turned into live briefings. Representatives from the Department of Treasury, the FBI's Cybercrime Unit, and Homeland Security joined the room, faces pale and voices tight. Every monitor lit up with evidence: cloned transaction packets, replicated withdrawal requests, red-flagged encryption mismatches. The scary part? No money had technically disappeared. Yet. But it was moving, duplicated, mirrored, siphoned in ways that couldn't be traced by standard tools. A financial shell game. And the operators were still in the system, staying one step ahead of every patch attempt. I knew this pattern. It wasn't random. Whoever was doing this had trained an AI against Nova Suite's architecture, using the very stress tests Westbridge had leaked to third-party vendors for marketing purposes. The exploit was modular, intelligent, patient. This was never just negligence, I told the room. It was infiltration. And it's been building since before I was fired. Maya's eyes met mine. You think someone inside helped? I think someone inside built the skeleton, I said. And someone outside dressed it in muscle and skin. Back in the operations bunker, Armin patched into our system via Ghost Terminal, having finally cut ties with Westbridge entirely after their internal network began blacklisting his device. Status? I asked. He looked exhausted. They still think this is a stress test bug. Holloway is blaming legacy database sync errors. He's telling them it'll smooth out by launch day. I almost laughed. Launch day might be the last day. Worse, Armin said, forwarding a message to my terminal. They're pushing forward with press interviews. CEOs scheduled to appear on 3 business shows by Friday. They're calling Nova Suite the new frontier in adaptive finance. I stared at the feet of collapsing back-end systems and muttered, it's adaptive, all right. Just not for us. Day turned to night. Then night to early morning. We found them. The attackers. Maya burst into the room, a rare flicker of adrenaline in her always calm demeanor. We traced 3 of the injection routes, she said. The primary servers running dark through a routed exchange node in Prague. But the signature matches something familiar. She pulled up a file I hadn't seen in months. It was a test environment from Nova Suite's pre-alpha stage, a version only 5 people at Westbridge had access to. Including me. Including Holloway. Including the third-party auditor they'd brought in for a 2-week optimization contract. The same auditor who'd left no paper trail. No badge logs. No contractor files on record. I looked at Maya. It was never just a vulnerability, I said. It was a plant. A Trojan horse disguised as optimization code. Installed before anyone asked questions. Left to rot, until the moment was right. That moment was now. And unless we shut it down, the dominoes wouldn't stop at bank statements. They'd reach pensions. Medical records. International trades. Government bonds. This wasn't just a breach. It was a cyber warhead, buried in the middle of a digital economy no one wanted to admit was fragile. We mobilized the counterstrike within 6 hours. A coordinated operation, NSA, FBI, and CyberCon 5. I was embedded with Maya's team, walking them through the trapdoors and fail points I documented. Armin fed real-time updates from sandboxed Nova Suite clones, testing every potential kill switch. We found one. Not elegant. Not safe. But viable. Nova Suite's architecture relied on an authentication loop synced every 24 hours across backup nodes. If we intercepted the next cycle and forced a recursive loop failure, it would trigger a fail-safe rollback protocol, essentially rebooting the system and severing all ghost routines. But it would also wipe a chunk of life financial data in the process. Fallback data can be restored, Vance said. But only if we move fast, Maya added. Everyone looked at me. I nodded. Do it. At 3:04 a.m., we executed the loop fracture. For 12 seconds, Nova Suite went completely dark. When the lights came back on, the ghost routines were gone. So were over 17,000 pending transactions, but they were recoverable. The Trojan horse had been decapitated. Not erased, but crippled. Enough for the NSA to pin down the Origin network. Enough for the FBI to open formal international indictments. Enough for Westbridge's board to cancel the Nova Suite launch. The next morning, Westbridge stock plummeted. Dane Holloway resigned. Cassandra Granger was placed on leave pending federal inquiry. And me? I was invited back into the war room, not as an outsider, but as lead systems integrity officer for the newly formed National Cyber Infrastructure Task Force. My title wasn't what mattered. What mattered was this: we stopped the breach. We bought time. And now? Now the world was finally ready to hear the truth. The hearing room smelled like old leather and politics. It was one of those Capitol chambers where careers are made or destroyed under soft lighting and sharp microphones. Ornate, imposing, and filled to the brim with people who'd never written a line of code in their lives, but who now wanted to know exactly how a national banking catastrophe had been weeks away from detonation. I adjusted the color of my borrowed suit, the one that still felt more like a costume than a uniform. I wasn't here as a whistleblower anymore. I was here as a witness. And possibly the one person in the room who could explain what had nearly brought the nation's financial spine to its knees. Maya sat a few rows back, flanked by CyberCon 5 agents. She gave me a short nod, the same way she had the night I showed her the simulation. A quiet reassurance that said, "You've already done the hard part. Just tell the truth." So I did. They swore me in. Cameras flashed. A dozen representatives leaned forward at once. "Mr. Marcellus," the committee chair began, "can you walk us through your first concerns with the Nova Suite platform?" I took a breath. "My concerns started 3 years ago," I said. "Back when I noticed internal logs weren't matching what our firewall protocols were reporting. Packet losses, unknown pings from internal loopbacks, buried routines that reinitialized without input. Was this during your time at Westbridge Holdings?" "Yes," I said. "I worked in systems analysis, and later network support. But I was locked out of higher clearance audits. They didn't want lower tier staff interfering. And when you brought this to your superiors, I was dismissed. Brushed off. Told it was a stress echo or a sync issue. I wasn't considered credible enough to raise red flags." The room murmured. A few senators glanced at each other. I continued, voice steady. "The problem wasn't just a flaw in Nova Suite. It was the culture around it. A refusal to acknowledge that systems built for marketing don't always translate to actual security. They prioritized the launch date over the risk model." "And what was the flaw?" one senator asked. "Nova Suite had an embedded trigger routine," I explained. "Activated only under peak traffic with certain sandboxed variables, conditions a typical stress test wouldn't simulate. But the exploit allowed unauthorized access to transaction buffers. Which meant, under the right load, you could extract, duplicate, or reroute financial data with zero detection." Another senator leaned forward. "Are you saying this was deliberate?" "I'm saying someone built it to be invisible. Whether that was through negligence or intent, I'll let the investigation decide." That changed the temperature of the room. Fast. They asked about logs. About timelines. About why no one stopped it sooner. And I gave them everything. Later, during a break in the hearing, I stood at the edge of the rotunda, sipping bitter coffee and staring out over the marble railing. The Capitol felt like another planet. I'd spent my life buried in back-end systems, trying to make sure things didn't fall apart. I never imagined I'd be testifying in front of lawmakers about how close we'd come to a digital collapse. A familiar voice pulled me out of my thoughts. "You were right," said a low voice behind me. I turned. Dane Holloway. He looked different now. Paler. Smaller. No expensive suit, just a plain gray jacket. The trademark smirk was gone. "You shouldn't be here," I said. "I was subpoenaed for tomorrow's session," he replied. "I just wanted to see what it felt like. Watching someone else take the microphone." I didn't respond. He shifted on his feet. "They're going to tear me apart." I nodded. "Probably. I wasn't trying to crash the system, Theo. I just didn't want to be the guy who pulled the plug on a billion-dollar launch." "You were the guy who ignored the data," I said. "And the guy who pushed me out when I tried to show you." He looked away. I kept telling myself it couldn't be that bad. "It was," I said. "And you knew it." After a long pause, he finally whispered, "I'm sorry. It didn't fix anything. But maybe it was a start." Over the next few weeks, The fallout spread like a slow-motion explosion. Westbridge's stock hit rock bottom. 3 board members resigned. The SEC launched an investigation into their filings. Congressional pressure forced a freeze on NovaSuite's development across all federal institutions. The media called it the ghost code crisis. But inside our circles, it became something else, a wake-up call. Maya and I began drafting new legislation frameworks, backed by a joint task force, to require external vulnerability testing, open source documentation for financial platforms, and AI auditing by neutral entities. They named it the Marcellus Mandate. I hated the name. But I understood why it mattered. Because it wasn't about me. It was about the kid in some server room right now, noticing something odd in the logs, about to be ignored by a middle manager who doesn't speak code. It was about every so-called support guy or tech girl who gets dismissed because their badge doesn't say director. It was about making sure next time, someone like me wouldn't have to risk everything to be heard. One evening, as I left a panel at the National Cybersecurity Conference, I found a folded note slipped into my backpack. It read, "You saved more than money. You saved trust. Keep building." I smiled. Maya's subtle way of reminding me we weren't done. Because the work never really ends. Hackers evolve. Companies forget. But truth? Truth has a strange way of finding its voice, even in a whisper from the basement floor. Back at my desk at the Joint Cyber Infrastructure Center, I pinned up a quote I'd found scribbled in a discarded notebook from my Westbridge days. "You don't need a spotlight to see the cracks. Just the nerve to call them what they are." That was my job now. Not just spotting cracks. Calling them out. And making sure the people at the top finally listened. The echo of the Capitol hearings faded slowly, like the final hum of a system shutting down after running far too hot. In the weeks that followed, life didn't quiet down, it shifted. And for the first time in years, it felt like it was shifting in the right direction. I found myself in a position I'd never dreamed of, not behind a help desk or buried in support tickets, but at the helm of a national cybersecurity initiative. The National Cyber Infrastructure Task Force, NCIT, wasn't just a committee. It was a response. A new division meant to rebuild trust in the systems that keep modern life moving. I was tasked with overseeing its foundation, training protocols, and long-term resilience strategy. No more whispering warnings into silence. Now, I got to hand the microphone to others who'd never been given one. Our training center was built inside a renovated federal data facility just outside DC. The walls were lined with whiteboards, real-time network traffic monitors, and open workstations with no title plaques, just names and ideas. I walked through the atrium one morning to find a room full of new recruits, mostly in their 20s. Bright-eyed. Sharp. Some were military, others private sector dropouts tired of profit-first thinking. A few reminded me of myself, quiet, cautious, but dangerous once you got past the surface. They looked up as I stepped in, some straightening instinctively. "You don't need to salute me," I said with a small smile. "Just show me you know how to find the crack in the system." That got a few chuckles. Good. They weren't here to fear authority. They were here to question it. I pulled up the first case file. "This," I said, pointing to a graph of network activity, "was the NovaSuite breach attempt. What do you see?" One woman, Eliza, raised her hand. "The latency is spiking early. Way before the data injection point." "Exactly," I nodded. Because the attacker wasn't interested in the transaction. They were watching the authentication delays. Learning how the system choked under pressure. I paused. This isn't just about finding the back doors. It's about understanding who leaves them open, and why. When I wasn't in the field, I was back in DC, helping Maya draft the official Marcellus protocol. We stripped the name down later, too much attention, but the framework remained. Third-party audits before public deployment. Mandatory disclosure of AI-assisted code in critical infrastructure. Continuous monitoring by independent ethics teams. Legal protection for technical whistleblowers. That last one mattered to me more than any policy. Because for every story like mine, there were 10 others we never heard. People buried, blacklisted, Discredited because they spoke the truth at the wrong time to the wrong crowd. We were going to change that. One night, after a long debrief with the NSA, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in months. Granger. The same Cassandra Granger who'd once signed the document that ended my career. Theo. I'm no longer at Westbridge. I've been consulting with a nonprofit on ethical tech reform. I was wrong about you. About everything. If you ever have time, I'd like to help fix what we broke. CG. I sat with the message for a while. Then archived it. Not out of spite. But because some apologies take time to feel real. Maybe one day. But not yet. 6 months later, the Black Hat Cyber Defense Summit invited me to deliver the closing keynote. I nearly said no. Not because I was ungrateful. But because I didn't think the story needed retelling. Ma, you convinced me. Someone out there is sitting in their basement office right now, she said. Someone just like you. Give them something to carry. So I did. I stepped onto the stage before a crowd of thousands. A sea of screens and minds sharper than any weapon. I was once just the IT guy, I said. I spent years in a system that didn't see me. And I know a lot of you are still in that place. A few heads nodded. I continued, cybersecurity isn't about perfection. It's about vigilance. It's not about how loud you speak, but whether you speak up at all. The next breach won't come from outside. It'll come from inside, through convenience, silence, arrogance. I paused. And when it does, I hope you're the one who sees it. I hope you have the courage to say something. To log it. To document it. To believe in your voice, even when others won't. The applause came slowly. Then built. And somewhere in the back, I spotted Armin, leaning against a wall, grinning like he used to when we beat a stress test no one believed we could. Today, the medal sits on a shelf in my apartment. The one they gave me after everything settled, Presidential Recognition for Cyber Excellence. It's not the medal that matters. It's the note taped behind it, written by a college intern who had quietly shadowed one of our open access sessions. Because of you, I'm staying in the field. I thought I wasn't good enough to make a difference. But you proved that even the quiet ones can save the system. That's what this was all about. Not revenge. Not recognition. Legacy. A legacy written not in press releases or titles, but in every firewall that holds, every junior analyst who refuses to be quiet, every system that gets stronger because someone asked the hard questions. I don't know where the next threat will come from. But I know one thing for sure. We'll be ready. Because now, when someone says, "You're just the IT guy," they'll think twice. They'll remember what happens when one IT guy refuses to stay silent. And they'll know. Sometimes, the ones you overlook are the ones who save you.